She knew about the affair. She knew about the child. She even knew the woman was her sister. But she waited for him to tell the truth. And when he didn't, she destroyed him with it. The morning sun spilled gently through the tall windows of the bridal suite, lighting the room in gold. Outside, the countryside was still, dew shimmering on the trimmed hedges, birds singing as if in celebration. Inside, laughter and perfume filled the air. Bridesmaids in silk robes clinked glasses of champagne, their chatter floating around like soft music. At the center of it all sat Sarah, the bride everyone envied. Her white gown hung on the door, delicate lace catching the light. The makeup artist was dusting shimmer over her collarbones. Everything was perfect, at least that's how it looked. But perfection has a way of hiding cracks. Sarah's phone buzzed on the vanity table. Again. She snatched it quickly, glancing at the screen, then locked it without replying. No one noticed the tightness in her breath. Her maid of honor, Lily, leaned over. "You okay? You've checked that phone 10 times in 5 minutes. Sarah smiled, a thin, practiced smile. "Just nerves." Lily grinned, oblivious. "Please, you've been planning this for 2 years. You've got nothing to be nervous about." Sarah nodded, but her eyes betrayed her. She turned to the window, watching the guests arrive far below. The groom's family was already gathering near the garden arches, dressed in coordinated tones of navy and pearl. Marcus's parents stood proudly, greeting people with wide, confident smiles. And there he was, Marcus, laughing with his groomsmen, that familiar dimple showing, the man she'd fallen in love with. Her heart clenched. Because once upon a time she believed he was the safest place in the world. Flashback. The scent of roasted coffee. A clumsy collision at a cafe. Her latte spilled, his apology sincere. They'd laughed, talked for hours, then met again the next day. It had been effortless, the kind of connection people write songs about. Then the proposal. Candlelight, soft music, Marcus on one knee, his voice trembling as he asked her to be his forever. Sarah had cried then, real, unguarded tears. But that was before the receipt. It had appeared 3 weeks ago in a stack of mail she was sorting absent-mindedly, $50,000 cash withdrawal, dated 8 months back. Marcus's signature scrawled at the bottom. When she'd asked, his reaction was instant and sharp. "It's a business investment," he'd said too quickly. "Don't start turning this into something it's not." She'd wanted to believe him. But the way he avoided her eyes, the way he changed the subject, the way he kissed her afterward, too carefully, too deliberately, told her there was more. Since then, every look, every touch had felt rehearsed. Sarah blinked away the memory and stared at her reflection. Her makeup was flawless. Her curls fell perfectly. And yet she didn't recognize the woman staring back. 5 minutes till the dress, one of the bridesmaids called. The room stirred into motion again, laughter, heels clacking, cameras flashing. Sarah moved mechanically, slipping into her gown. The fabric whispered against her skin. Lily zipped the back and gasped. "You look like a dream," she said softly. Sarah forced a smile. "Thank you." Her heart pounded. As the others fussed with her veil, Sarah's phone buzzed again. This time a message preview lit up the screen. "Are you sure about this?" She picked it up, typed quickly, "It has to be today." Her hand trembled as she hit send. Then she slipped the phone into her purse and took a deep breath. Downstairs the music had begun. Guests were taking their seats. The officiant's voice carried faintly through the open window. "Ready?" Lily asked. Sarah turned. For a moment, her face softened. "Yeah," she said quietly. "Let's get married." But her eyes told a different story, calm, sharp, calculating. The procession began. Bridesmaids glided ahead of her, their dresses sweeping over the rose petals scattered along the aisle. As Sarah stepped out, a hush fell over the crowd. Cameras rose. Marcus's gaze found her, and for a split second, his smile faltered, like he'd seen something in her he didn't recognize. Sarah walked slowly, deliberately. Every step echoed with unspoken truth. By the time she reached the altar, her heartbeat was steady again. She met Marcus's eyes and smiled as though nothing in the world was wrong. The officiant spoke. The guests watched in awe. But beneath her bouquet, Sarah's fingers brushed over her hidden phone, and she whispered to herself, just loud enough for her own heart to hear. Today, it all ends. And as the wind carried her words into the bright morning air, the perfect day began to unravel. The men's suite smelled of whiskey, cologne, and polished leather. Outside, laughter floated through the countryside air, but inside, tension sat thick like fog. Marcus stood before the mirror, his tie undone, eyes rimmed red. His reflection stared back, a groom who should have been glowing but looked like he'd aged 10 years overnight. "Bro, you planning to tie that thing or just admire yourself all morning?" Jake asked, grinning as he fastened his cufflinks. His tone was easy but his eyes, sharp, assessing, never left Marcus. Marcus chuckled dryly. "You sound like Mom." "She's downstairs crying already," Jake said. "Says her baby boy's finally settling down. Guess she doesn't know her baby boys had half a bottle of scotch before noon." Marcus shrugged, reaching for the glass on the table. "Wedding jitters. Right?" Jake took the glass from him. "You've been jittery for weeks. What's going on?" Marcus didn't answer. He turned back to the mirror, trying to steady his tie, but his fingers fumbled. His heartbeat thudded in his ears. He couldn't tell Jake. Not today. Especially not today. Flashback. 8 months ago. A hotel bar bathed in golden light. Music low, conversation louder. Marcus sat with his groomsmen, drinks flowing, laughter easy. It was supposed to be harmless, a bachelor weekend to unwind before the wedding chaos began. Then she walked in. Emma. Blonde hair, tired eyes, a beauty marked by sadness. They talked, one drink turning into 3, laughter masking guilt. He'd told himself it was just talk, until it wasn't. Until the room blurred and regret faded into the sound of the rain outside. The next morning he woke up in a stranger's bed, the taste of shame heavy in his mouth. She was still asleep. He left quietly, promising himself it was a mistake that would stay buried. But mistakes have a way of breathing. Weeks later his phone rang. Her voice shaky, scared. "Marcus, I'm pregnant." The world stopped. He'd met her in a parking lot 3 nights later, sweat clinging to his palms as he handed her an envelope, $50,000 cash and a note that read, "You deserve better, but this can't destroy her." She'd cried. He couldn't look her in the eye. Then he turned and left, thinking money could erase guilt. He was wrong. Back in the present, Marcus sat heavily on the couch, running his thumb along the edge of his watch. Jake was watching him again, that same protective look he'd worn since they were kids. "You sure you're okay, man? You look like you're about to face a firing squad." Marcus forced a smile. "I'm fine. Just nervous." Jake leaned closer. "If you're not ready for this." "I am," Marcus snapped a little too sharply. Then softer, "I am. Sarah's the best thing that's ever happened to me." He meant it. In his own twisted way he believed it. Jake studied him for a long moment before sighing and clapping him on the shoulder. "All right. But try to smile when you walk down there, huh? You look like a man heading to court, not a wedding." Marcus laughed, hollow and dry. Jake left the room to grab something from the car. The suite went quiet. The sound of distant music floated in, guests finding their seats, life moving toward the moment he dreaded most. Marcus's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen. Unknown number. One message. "She deserves to know." His blood ran cold. He stared at the text, heart hammering. The words blurred, burned into his mind. Then quickly he deleted it. The phone slipped in his trembling hand. He stood pacing. Someone knew. Someone was watching. Jake re-entered, holding his boutonniere. "Still breathing?" he joked, but then paused. "You look pale." Marcus exhaled hard. "I'm fine. Just Nervous. Jake frowned. You keep saying that like you're trying to convince yourself. Marcus forced a grin, took the boutonniere and pinned it to his jacket. Let's just get this over with. Jake raised an eyebrow. Romantic. Marcus reached for the scotch bottle, poured one last glass and downed it in a single swallow. The burn steadied him, or at least numbed him. He looked at his reflection one more time. The tux fit perfectly, the smile practiced, the eyes hollow. Behind that mirror stood a man everyone believed was ready to start forever. But inside, the clock was already ticking. Downstairs, the music changed, time to take his place at the altar. Jake opened the door, waiting. Ready? Marcus nodded, even as his stomach turned. Yeah, he lied. As they stepped into the corridor, sunlight spilled through the windows, bright and unforgiving. Marcus's phone buzzed again in his pocket. He didn't look this time. He already knew what it would say. Today. The church bells echoed faintly through the open countryside, each chime rolling across the fields like a reminder of time running out. Emma sat in the front seat of the old van, her fingers gripping the steering wheel so tightly that her knuckles had turned white. The air was heavy with silence, broken only by the soft hum of the engine and the gentle rhythm of her baby's breathing in the back seat. Michael slept soundly in his carrier, wrapped in a pale blue blanket. His chest rose and fell, steady but fragile, each breath a quiet miracle. Beside him, 3 dogs, Ash, Luna and Scout, sat alert, trained eyes fixed on their handler. Years of discipline had made them steady under pressure. Today they would need every bit of that. Emma looked out toward the stone chapel at the edge of the field. Cars were lined neatly along the gravel path. Music drifted faintly from inside, mingling with laughter and the murmur of guests. Somewhere in there, Sarah, her sister, was about to walk down the aisle. She'd been parked here for an hour, watching, debating, breaking apart inside. Could she really do this? Flashback. 2 little girls in matching dresses, running barefoot across their mother's garden. Sarah always faster, louder, brighter. Emma the quiet one trying to keep up. Their mother used to say, "You two are fire and water, can't live together, can't live apart." But after their mother's death, the fire won. The will had been simple, but Sarah wanted control. The argument had been brutal, words flung like knives. They hadn't spoken since. 2 years of silence. 2 years of pretending the other didn't exist. Until the night Emma met Marcus. It was raining, the kind of night that smelled of regret before it even began. She was at the hotel bar after a long conference, sipping something strong, trying to forget how empty her life felt. He sat beside her, charming, confident, with a sadness in his eyes that mirrored her own. They talked, laughed, shared too much. She had no idea who he really was. Not until months later, scrolling through her feed, did she see the headline, "Marcus and Sarah are engaged." The photo was picture perfect. Her sister's hand on his chest, her ring catching the sunlight. Emma had dropped her phone, bow rising in her throat. The man she trusted, the man who'd held her like she meant something, was about to marry her sister. Then came the test. The hospital visit. The heartbeat on the monitor. She'd wanted to hate the child, but when she felt that tiny flutter inside her, love drowned out everything else. When she told Marcus, his voice turned to ice. "I'll take care of it," he said. 2 nights later, he met her in a parking lot. He didn't look her in the eye as he handed her the envelope. 50,000 in cash and a piece of paper with words that still made her sick. "You agree never to contact me again." She'd ripped it up. He'd walked away. She raised Michael alone. He was born early, fragile but perfect. Until last month. The doctor's words had felt like a verdict. A rare heart condition. "He'll need surgery soon or..." She couldn't finish the sentence. The cost? $200,000. She'd called Marcus in desperation. He answered once. "We had a deal," he said coldly. "If you call again, I'll make sure you regret it." And then the line went dead. Now, sitting in the van, Emma reached for the folder on the passenger seat. Inside, DNA test results, medical reports, bank statements, the evidence he thought she'd never dare to show. Her reflection stared back in the rearview mirror, tired, pale, resolute. She turned to the dogs. "Ash," she whispered. The golden retriever's ears perked. "Luna." "Scout." They straightened, alert. She placed the small white bassinet harness gently around Ash's neck. The baby stirred, whimpered, then settled. Emma smiled sadly, brushing a tear from her cheek. "Good boy," she whispered. The chapel bells rang again. Time. Emma looked one last time at her sleeping son. His fingers curled around the edge of his blanket. So small. So undeserving of all this pain. She took a deep breath and whispered, "I'm sorry, Sarah. But you deserve the truth, both of you." She opened the van door. The cold air rushed in, sharp and clean. The dog stepped out obediently, paws crunching on gravel. Emma lifted the folder to her chest and started walking toward the chapel, the sound of distant vows drifting faintly through the air. Each step felt heavier, but her purpose burned brighter. This wasn't revenge anymore. It was revelation. And as she neared the chapel doors, sunlight cut through the stained glass, bathing her in fractured color, like a woman walking into both judgment and freedom. The chapel was alive with sunlight, the stained glass scattering rainbows over rows of eager guests. The air smelled of roses and polished wood. A quiet hush settled as Sarah appeared at the top of the aisle, her white gown flowing like a river of silk. Every eye followed her, but hers were fixed on Marcus. He stood at the altar, perfect tuxedo, hands clasped. His smile was measured but pale. Even from this distance, Sarah could see the tension beneath the practiced calm. The officiant's voice filled the hall, smooth and gentle, reciting words of love, partnership, and trust, phrases that now carried an ironic weight. For better, for worse. In sickness and in health. To love, honor, and cherish, the officiant said. Each syllable landed like a hammer against the facade Marcus had spent months constructing. The guests shifted, leaning forward as the officiant paused. If anyone has reason why these two should not be wed. The doors burst open with a force that sent a shiver down every spine. 3 dogs charged down the aisle, their paws pounding the polished floor. The lead dog carried a bassinet in its mouth, moving with careful precision. Inside, a 6-month-old baby stirred, eyes blinking at the sudden chaos. Gasps erupted from the crowd, some covering mouths, others whispering frantically. Marcus froze, his hands tightening around the edge of the altar. His eyes widened. Sarah's expression didn't change, she remained perfectly composed, her gaze locked on the baby. For a fleeting moment, the world seemed suspended between heartbeats. Emma stepped into view behind the dogs, trembling slightly but walking with a steady, determined purpose. She carried a folder in one hand, the other brushing stray hair from her face. Her voice cut through the whispers, steady and clear. "I have a reason." The chapel fell silent, all attention shifting to the woman who had not been invited. Emma's words came carefully, each one striking like a lightning bolt. She told the story, the bachelor weekend, Marcus's affair, the envelope of cash, the cold agreement that was supposed to erase her existence. She showed the DNA test, the signed contract, the texts where he refused to help with Michael's medical bills. The bassinet wobbled slightly as Ash, the lead dog, adjusted his pace. The baby cooed, oblivious, a stark reminder of the life Marcus had tried to erase. Marcus's face paled further, his lips twitching. "That's not, she's lying," he stammered, voice rising. "You don't know what you're talking about." Emma held up receipts, photos, messages, evidence that could not be denied. She let them fall from her hands, fluttering onto the aisle like confetti of truth. The crowd gasped again, murmurs rising to a crescendo. Some guests stood, shocked, unable to believe the spectacle unfolding before them. Sarah's eyes did not leave the baby. Her hands gripped her bouquet tightly, knuckles white. The calm in her posture belied the storm within. She stepped forward slowly, deliberately, every movement measured. "Marcus," Emma said, her voice firm. "This is your son. He needs surgery you refuse to pay for. This is the life you tried to ignore, the promises you tried to break." Marcus's hands shook. He opened his mouth, but no words came. His carefully constructed world was collapsing around him, brick by brick. Sarah took a deep breath, the air almost visible as tension thickened the chapel. She looked down at Michael, then back at Marcus. Her voice, when it came, was quiet but cutting. "I know everything." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some glanced at each other, realizing this was no simple accusation. It was a reckoning. Marcus swallowed hard, eyes darting from Sarah to Emma to the baby. "Sarah, wait." She raised a hand, stopping him with a single, graceful gesture. Her ring sparkled in the sunlight, then slowly, deliberately, she slipped it off and set it on the altar. A hush fell again, the sound of hearts pausing in unison. Emma stepped closer, her trembling replaced by resolve. "I'm sorry it had to be like this," she said. "But the truth cannot be buried anymore." The guests whispered, their collective shock filling the hall. Cameras clicked, some recording, others simply stunned. Marcus's jaw tightened, his pale face crumbling as he realized the enormity of what had been exposed. Sarah reached down, lifting Michael gently from the bassinet. The baby's small fingers curled around hers. In that moment she was both a sister and a mother, protector and judge. She turned toward Emma and nodded, no words needed. Together they walked slowly down the aisle, leaving Marcus frozen at the altar, the echoes of his betrayal ringing louder than the wedding bells. The ceremony, the vows, the "I do," all of it evaporated into silence. In its place stood truth, raw and unflinching, the kind of revelation that changes everything. And for the first time that day, Sarah felt the weight lift, leaving only clarity, power and justice in its wake. The chapel was silent, the echoes of gasps and whispers still hanging like mist in the air. The evidence lay scattered across the aisle, photographs, receipts, and the flapping pages of the DNA test. Marcus stood frozen, pale, his carefully controlled world crumbling piece by piece. But it was Sarah who held the power now. She took a slow, deliberate step forward, her heels clicking softly against the polished floor. The entire room seemed to lean in, sensing the storm that had been building for weeks. "I have something to say," Sarah's voice rang out, calm but sharp, silencing every whisper, every rustle. All eyes turned to her. Even Marcus seemed to shrink under the weight of her gaze. "I've known about the affair for 3 weeks," she said. The words landed like hammers. "That receipt I found wasn't just suspicious. It was the first clue. I hired a private investigator. I traced every step, every lie, every attempt to hide the truth." Her eyes flicked to Emma, standing tall despite her trembling earlier. "I knew about you. About Michael. About everything." The guests exchanged shocked glances, murmurs buzzing like electricity through the air. Some whispered her name in disbelief. Some craned their necks, unable to look away. "I didn't cancel this wedding immediately," Sarah continued, her voice steady, "because I wanted to give Marcus every chance to do the right thing. I wanted him to confess, to choose honesty over deception." She paused, letting the words settle. "But he chose lies. Even today. Even in front of everyone he claimed to love." Emma's eyes filled with tears. She had expected outrage, anger, but Sarah's composure, her clarity, struck deeper than any yelling or screaming could have. "I wish you had come to me sooner, Emma," Sarah said softly but firmly. "Family comes before pride. Always. You shouldn't have faced this alone." Marcus tried to speak, to stammer some excuse, but Sarah held up a hand, stopping him before the words could. "Skip." "No," she said. "I don't need to hear it. You've had your chance." She lifted her hand slowly and removed the engagement ring from her finger. The diamond caught the sunlight, sparkling against the polished wood. With deliberate calm, she placed it on the altar, beside the scattered papers and the remnants of broken trust. Her gaze returned to Marcus. "You didn't just betray me," she said, her voice quiet but cutting. "You abandoned your own child. I could never marry a man like that." A gasp rippled through the chapel. Marcus's mouth opened, but no sound came. His eyes darted to the floor, then to the scattered evidence, then back to Sarah, helpless, unmasked, undone. Sarah turned toward Emma. The tension in her shoulders softened, replaced by warmth and resolve. She stepped forward and embraced her sister. The moment was brief but powerful, a lifeline stretched across years of silence and misunderstanding. "And this little one," Sarah whispered, kneeling to meet baby Michael's gaze for the first time. His tiny fingers curled around hers instinctively, and she felt an ache of love she hadn't anticipated. "He's your nephew," she said softly. "And he'll never be alone again." Emma exhaled, a mixture of relief and gratitude washing over her. Thank you," she said, voice shaking. Sarah rose, placing a protective hand over Michael. "We'll figure out his medical bills," she said firmly, eyes sweeping the room to include everyone listening. "Together. As family should." The dogs, loyal and alert, wagged their tails and stepped closer, as if sensing the newfound calm. Emma lifted the bassinet slightly, and Sarah walked beside her, a steady presence as they moved toward the doors. The aisle stretched empty before them, sunlight scattering across rose petals. Cameras clicked, some recording, some frozen in disbelief, capturing a scene that would be remembered for years. The bouquet Sarah had carried lay abandoned, petals scattered like memories of promises never meant to be. Marcus remained at the altar, pale, shaking. His tuxedo felt suffocating, a symbol of the life he had tried to build on lies. His best man Jake stood beside him, eyes narrowed, jaw tight with disgust and disbelief. The final image lingered, the empty aisle, the scattered petals, the abandoned bouquet, and a man left alone, stripped of pretense, stripped of control. Outside, the sun shone on the countryside, indifferent to the chaos it had witnessed within the chapel walls. Sarah, Emma, and Michael stepped through the doors together, the dogs padding at their side. For the first time that day there was freedom, there was truth, and there was family. And behind them, the echoes of betrayal faded into silence, leaving only clarity, justice, and the promise of a future built on honesty.